It was supposed to be an ordinary Tuesday in Manchester. The kind of day where you sip your coffee slowly, scroll through your emails half asleep, and wonder how long until the weekend arrives. But that morning, something felt off. I opened the curtains and froze. There it was. A sleek, jet-black luxury car parked right outside our building. Not just any car, this was the kind you'd see in music videos or parked outside five-star hotels. Everything about it screamed expensive. The chrome rims gleamed like mirrors, the body looked freshly waxed, and the tinted windows gave it a mysterious, almost arrogant presence. Then I saw him. Reza. Standing right next to it like he belonged there. He was wearing his usual all-black outfit, ironed shirt, ripped jeans, and that smug smile that used to make me fall in love with him. He slipped on his sunglasses, glanced up at our window, and gave me a little wave. "Come down, babe," he shouted. "Got something to show you." I grabbed my coat and rushed down, heart pounding. Part excitement, part confusion. When I reached him, he leaned in and kissed my cheek. "You like it?" I blinked. "Whose car is this?" Reza grinned. "It's for a project. A client wants a luxury aesthetic for their fashion shoot. Said I could borrow the car for a few days." "Cool, right?" He handed me the keys like it was nothing. Like we were just that kind of couple now. The kind who had designer things and didn't ask questions. I nodded slowly. Very cool. But inside, I wasn't so sure. We had barely paid rent last month. I'd dipped into my emergency savings twice this year already. I had taken on 2 extra writing gigs just to cover bills. Reza's photography studio had been slow, and he hadn't brought in real income in months. And now, this. Still, I smiled. Took a few pictures of him posing next to the car. Even climbed into the driver's seat while he filmed a short Instagram reel. I played the role of the proud girlfriend, the lucky girl who got spoiled. But later that night, while Reza was in the shower, I opened our banking app. There it was. £3,000. Gone. The name on the transaction. Mine. I stared at the screen in disbelief. I scrolled further, checking every detail. The payment had gone to a luxury car rental company. 2 days ago. My heart pounded louder than the water running in the bathroom. My breath caught in my throat. Reza had used my money. Without asking. Without even telling me. I could have confronted him. Demanded answers. But instead, I quietly closed the app and pretended I hadn't seen a thing. That night, he curled up beside me, kissed my forehead, and said, "Thank you for always believing in me." I didn't reply. I just stared at the ceiling, heart heavy, mind racing. The next morning, I made us breakfast. Played the part. Smiled. Laughed at his stupid jokes. Wore a new dress he hadn't noticed before. And while he talked about upcoming shoots and big plans, I nodded along. But in my head, I was somewhere else entirely. I was tracing every lie he told me over the past few months. The late-night work sessions. The mystery calls he always took in another room. The way he'd started locking his phone. The subtle shift in how he touched me, more routine, less passion. And then there was Vanya. The name popped up under my Instagram photo. She'd liked it within minutes. Her profile was private, but her picture wasn't. A face I didn't recognize. Young. Flawless. Blonde. Pouting into the camera like she knew exactly how to get what she wanted. I clicked on her profile and scrolled. A few posts tagged in Manchester. A restaurant I knew Reza had visited just last week. The same cocktails I saw on his stories. My stomach turned. This wasn't just about money. This was something else. Something deeper. And I was going to find out what. But not by asking. Not by begging. I'd find out in silence. I'd play along. Because sometimes the best way to expose a liar is to pretend you believe every word they say. 3 days had passed since the car incident. Reza returned it just as casually as he had flaunted it, like a child bored of his new toy. He said nothing more about it, and neither did I. But silence doesn't mean peace. Sometimes, it's where the storm begins. That Friday evening, I decided to surprise him. He said he'd be editing all day at the studio. So, I picked up his favorite takeout from that little Thai place in Chorlton he loved and headed over, hoping to catch him off guard with something sweet and simple. The studio was dimly lit when I arrived. His car was parked outside. Inside, I could hear music playing, soft lo-fi beats, the kind he used to play when he wanted to focus. I knocked lightly, then let myself in. "Reza?" I called out. No answer. I walked in further. The air smelled different, warm, floral, almost sweet. A scent I didn't wear. Not my perfume. His laptop was open, editing software running, but no Reza in sight. I stepped around the corner, towards the small lounge area he'd set up with mismatched cushions and an old leather sofa. Then I heard it, a giggle. Soft. Feminine. I stopped in my tracks. A few seconds later, Reza emerged from the bathroom. Alone. Hair damp. Shirt half-buttoned. He froze when he saw me, eyes wide with shock. Not guilt. Shock. "Clara, what are you doing here?" I held up the bag. "Brought you dinner." He stared at the bag like it was a live grenade. "Thanks," he mumbled, stepping closer, pulling the rest of his shirt closed. I handed it to him and pretended not to notice the faint lipstick smudge near the collar. Light pink. Not my shade. And that scent, lingering in the air, on his clothes. Not mine either. He tried to act normal, chatting about work, telling me he was just freshening up after a long day. I smiled, nodded, and played along. But as I sat on the worn sofa watching him fumble with chopsticks, something inside me shifted. I no longer wanted the truth from him. I wanted evidence. Something irrefutable. And I had a plan. Over the next week, I began collecting small clues. Reza had grown careless. Or maybe overconfident. He left his studio keys in his coat pocket. One night while he was asleep, I slipped them out and made a copy. I waited until his next late-night edit session, when he told me not to wait up. At midnight, I crept out and headed to the studio. The place was empty, quiet, too clean. But in the bin, under crushed takeout boxes and old receipts, I found a small piece of gold foil. A chocolate wrapper from a boutique shop in the northern quarter. A place I knew I'd never been with Reza, but had seen tagged in Vonya's stories. Later that night, I scrolled through Vonya's profile again. She'd posted a picture that afternoon. A cappuccino, 2 cups, and a caption that read, "He gets me." The sleeve of a man's black shirt was just visible beside her mug. It matched one of Reza's. The pieces were coming together. But I still wasn't ready to confront him. I needed more. So I started keeping a journal. Every suspicious detail. Every odd excuse. Every unfamiliar scent and accidental clue. I wrote it all down, like a detective tracking a suspect. Because this wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about power. And I wasn't going to be the foolish girlfriend crying in a corner. I was going to be the woman who caught him red-handed, with nowhere left to run. The weeks passed in a blur of hidden glances, unspoken words, and small deceptions. Reza thought he was getting away with it, but every move he made only brought me closer to the final confrontation. I knew it was time to strike. One evening, I decided to invite Vonya to dinner. It wasn't difficult to arrange. Reza had often talked about her, the way he mentioned her as if she were an innocent colleague. But I knew better. The last time I checked her social media, she had posted a photo from a fancy restaurant in the city center with a caption that read, "Perfect evening with someone special." The someone special in question, I was sure, wasn't her brother. I made a reservation at a quiet, upscale restaurant on the outskirts of the city, a place I knew Riza frequented with clients. The kind of place with velvet curtains and dim lighting, where the expensive wines flowed freely, and the food was served in delicate portions. Vanya would feel comfortable there. It was easy to find a time when Riza had a late meeting. I told him I was catching up with some friends and would be out for a while. He barely looked up from his phone as he muttered, "See you later." I watched him leave the apartment and then quickly sent a message to Vanya, "Dinner. Just the two of us." She replied almost immediately, agreeing with a simple, "Sure." When? It was time. An hour later, Vanya arrived, dressed in a simple but elegant black dress. She smiled, clearly pleased with the arrangement. But I knew beneath her calm exterior, she was likely wondering why I'd invited her out of the blue. I didn't waste time on small talk. As we sat down to eat, I pushed the conversation in the direction I wanted. "I've been meaning to ask you," I started, watching her carefully. "How did you meet Riza?" She blinked, momentarily taken aback. But then she smiled, like a well-rehearsed actress playing her part. "We've known each other for ages. Just, a lot of mutual friends, I guess." She took a sip of her wine, her hand trembling slightly. "Mutual friends, huh?" I said casually, leaning back in my chair, letting the silence stretch between us. "Funny, I don't recall him ever mentioning you much before. Not until recently, anyway." Vanya froze, her eyes flickering to mine. "What do you mean?" "Just that he seems more focused on you now." I let the words hang in the air, each one loaded with intent. She shifted in her seat, her hand now clutching her glass a little too tightly. "Riza's a busy guy. Always working." I smiled sweetly, knowing full well she was lying through her teeth. "I know he is. He works so much, it's hard to find time for someone new. Especially with someone as demanding as you, right?" Her face blanched. She shifted again, uncomfortable under my gaze. But I pressed on. "I just wanted to understand," I continued, now more direct, "what kind of relationship you and Riza really have. Because it's clear it's not just professional." Vanya stared at me, her mask cracking for a moment. "Clara, this isn't what you think." I could feel the tension rise. My heart pounded with anticipation. This was the moment where the truth would finally come out. Before she could say anything more, I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "You see, Vanya, I'm not as naive as you think. I've seen the photos, the messages, the little things you've tried to hide. And I know about the time you spent with him last week at that restaurant." She went pale, eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. But there was no way out. "I think you should tell me the truth, Vanya. And I think you should tell me now." The silence that followed was heavy, thick with the weight of everything left unsaid. Finally, Vanya broke. Her shoulders slumped, and she let out a breath that was both a sigh of relief and a sound of defeat. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," she said quietly. "But Riza, he said he loved me. And I didn't know what else to do." I sat back, taking in the words, feeling a cold satisfaction wash over me. This was exactly what I had expected. But now, the game was on. Vanya's confession hung in the air, and for a moment, I allowed myself to enjoy the feeling of control. She was trapped, caught in her own lies, and the truth was finally out. But I didn't let up. No, this was only the beginning. I leaned in closer, my voice soft yet firm. "I'm sure Riza never told you about me, did he? About everything we've built, the life we've shared?" Vanya's eyes darted nervously, and I could almost see the cogs turning in her head, trying to find the right words to escape. But there was no escape now. "No," she whispered, barely audible. "He never mentioned you like that." I could feel her breaking, piece by piece. She was no longer the confident woman I had seen earlier. Now, she was just a scared girl, caught in a web she didn't know how to untangle. "You see," I continued, watching her closely, "I know everything. About your late-night meetings, your whispered conversations, the lies you've told to everyone around you. I knew the moment you started circling around Reza like a vulture, and I couldn't just stand by and let it happen." Vanya shifted uncomfortably, her gaze falling to her glass of wine, the reflection of the dim light flickering across her face. She didn't speak at first, but I could see the walls crumbling down, bit by bit. I didn't want it to be like this," she muttered, a strange mix of guilt and defiance in her tone. I thought I could have something with him. I thought he would leave you for me." The word stung, not because of the betrayal, it was expected, but because of the way she spoke about him as though she had a claim, as though she truly believed that the life they shared was something to be won, like a prize. I felt my pulse quicken with a mixture of anger and sorrow. "But you see, Vanya," I said, leaning forward, my voice now steady and calm, "he'll never leave me for you. Because as much as he tries to play both sides, it's me who knows him. It's me who understands him. And I've always known what he needed." Vanya's eyes met mine, defiant at first, but then, as the reality of my words sank in, the fight left her. "I don't know why I thought this would work," she said, her voice breaking. "I should have known better. I was just desperate." I could see the desperation in her eyes now, the same desperation that had pushed her into the arms of someone who had promised her everything, only to leave her with nothing. For a moment, there was silence between us, thick with the weight of our shared understanding. But then, just as quickly, I spoke again, the next move in my plan already forming in my mind. "But you're right about one thing," I said, my lips curling into a small smile. "You are desperate. Desperate for a life that doesn't belong to you. Desperate for something that will never be yours." Her face turned pale, and I could see the realization dawning on her. "What do you mean?" "You've been playing this game with the wrong person," I said softly, my voice dripping with cold certainty. "Reza might be your target, but you're going to lose." Vanya opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off with a single, firm glance. "I'm done being the woman left in the shadows, Vanya," I said. "And you? You're just a small part of the bigger picture. You'll see. It's all going to unravel. And when it does, Reza will regret the day he thought he could play me." I watched her for a moment, her eyes filled with uncertainty. But I didn't wait for her response. I stood up, ready to end this charade. "You should leave now," I said, my voice final. Vanya didn't fight me. She stood, slowly gathering her things, her hands trembling as she reached for her coat. She glanced at me one last time, but her eyes held no defiance now. Only a deep, sinking understanding of her defeat. I didn't look back as she left the restaurant, the door closing softly behind her. The game had officially begun. The following days were a whirlwind. Vanya's departure had left a bitter taste in my mouth, but it was a small victory. Reza didn't know yet. He had no idea that everything he'd built with Vanya was slowly crumbling under his nose, piece by piece. But I wasn't going to let him in on it just yet. No, this had to be done strategically. I spent the next few days laying low, watching, waiting. Reza was his usual self, busy with work, meeting friends, and seemingly oblivious to the storm brewing around him. But there was a crack in his usual facade, something I could sense whenever I looked into his eyes. It was the subtle shift in his behavior, like he was on edge, unsure of something but unwilling to face it. I wasn't ready to confront him yet. No, I wanted him to feel the weight of his own mistakes before I made my move. I knew what I had to do. It was time to plant the seed of doubt in his mind, to make him question everything. I couldn't just show him the truth, I had to make him realize it for himself. The opportunity came one afternoon, when Riza invited me to lunch at a small cafe in the city center. It was a place we used to go often, before everything became complicated. The sun was bright, shining through the glass windows, casting a warm glow on the wooden tables. It was the perfect setting, familiar, comforting, but with an underlying tension that neither of us could escape. As we sat across from each other, the silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Riza was busy stirring his coffee, avoiding eye contact. I could see the gears in his mind turning, his thoughts clearly elsewhere. He was trying to act normal, but I knew him too well. "You've been quiet lately," I said casually, taking a sip of my tea. "Everything okay at work?" He looked up, a bit startled, as if my voice had pulled him from a deep thought. His eyes were shadowed with something I couldn't quite place, a flicker of guilt maybe, or something worse. "Yeah, just a lot on my mind," he replied, forcing a smile. "You know how it is." I smiled back, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was a smile that hid all the anger and resentment I had been carefully cultivating. "I know," I said softly. "But sometimes, Riza, you can't keep everything inside. Eventually, it all catches up to you." His smile faltered, and I could tell I'd struck a nerve. Good. He needed to feel unsettled, like he was standing on the edge of something, waiting to fall. "You've been so distant lately," I continued, leaning in slightly. "It's like you've got something on your mind, something you're not telling me." His hand froze mid-air, and I saw his eyes flicker to mine, searching for something. He couldn't read me. "Not now, not anymore." "I told you, everything's fine," he said, a little too quickly. "Just work and everything else. It's nothing." I wasn't buying it. The way he said nothing, it was too rehearsed. There was something going on, and I was going to make sure he realized it. I leaned back in my chair, allowing the silence to settle. The tension between us was thick now, palpable. I could almost taste it in the air, the way things used to be before everything started to unravel. "You know," I said, after a long pause, "it's funny how you think you know someone. You think you have everything figured out, and then suddenly, things start falling apart. Little things start to slip, and before you know it, you're left with a broken mess. A mess that's hard to fix, no matter how hard you try." Riza's hand tightened around his coffee cup, the knuckles turning white. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. I watched him for a moment, letting the silence hang between us like a thread about to snap. I knew he wanted to say something, but he was too afraid of the truth. "You know," I said softly, almost whispering, "sometimes the people closest to you can surprise you. They do things you never thought they would. Things you can't even imagine." Riza finally met my gaze, his eyes searching mine, desperate for some kind of explanation. But I didn't give him one. Not yet. I stood up from the table, my movements slow and deliberate. "I think I should be going," I said, my voice laced with an emotion I didn't let him see, anger, disappointment, but most of all, control. "We'll talk later. But don't be surprised when everything you thought was solid starts to fall apart." I left the cafe before he could say anything else. I didn't need his words. I needed him to feel the uncertainty, the tension, and the fear that came with not knowing what would happen next. And that was just the beginning. The days that followed felt like a slow burn, each one dragging me closer to the inevitable confrontation. Riza's distance was palpable, but what struck me more was the quiet desperation behind his eyes whenever we crossed paths. It was as though he could feel the walls closing in, but didn't know how to stop it. He tried to reach out to me in subtle ways, like sending a text asking how my day was going or calling when I was least expecting it. Each time, I answered with the same cold, detached tone, keeping him at arm's length. The closer he got, the further I pushed him away. I could feel the tension building, each unspoken word weighing heavily between us. But I wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of knowing how much he'd hurt me. No, I was stronger than that now. It wasn't until the following week that things really started to shift. Reza invited me to dinner, a last-ditch effort, perhaps, to salvage whatever was left of our relationship. I agreed, mainly because I needed him to think everything was fine, to lull him into a false sense of security. He chose a high-end restaurant on the outskirts of the city, one with dim lighting and plush seating, where the atmosphere was designed to make you forget the world outside. But there was no escaping the reality of our situation, not for me, and certainly not for him. The night felt strangely familiar, yet completely foreign. We sat across from each other, the low hum of other diners around us, but our conversation was almost non-existent. Every now and then, Reza would make an attempt to engage, but it always felt forced, like he was trying too hard to be normal. I could tell he was nervous, fidgeting with his utensils, avoiding my gaze. It was clear he was struggling to find the right words, and deep down, I knew he was starting to panic. Finally, after what seemed like hours of strained silence, I decided to break the ice, but not in the way he expected. "Reza," I said, my voice steady but cold, "don't you find it strange that we're sitting here, pretending like everything is fine when we both know it isn't?" His eyes widened slightly, as if he hadn't anticipated me to address the situation so bluntly. He opened his mouth to speak, but I quickly silenced him with a raised hand. "You've been distant for weeks," I continued, leaning forward just slightly. "And I'm not blind. I know what's been happening behind my back." He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his jaw tightening, but he didn't say anything. I could see the guilt written all over his face, but he was too proud to admit it. "Vanya," I said, letting the name hang in the air, heavy with meaning. "I know everything, Reza. The lies, the late nights, the things you thought I didn't see. The truth has a way of coming out, doesn't it?" He looked away, his face flushed with shame, but still, no words came from his lips. His silence was all the answer I needed. I sat back in my chair, watching him, letting the weight of the moment settle in. It was almost poetic, in a way, how he had spent so much time trying to hide the truth, only for it to be laid bare before him in the most ordinary of settings. He had underestimated me, and now he was paying the price. "You thought you could get away with it," I said softly, my voice laced with a mixture of bitterness and amusement. "But I've been watching. I always watch." Reza's eyes met mine, finally filled with something real, regret, fear, and a deep understanding of the consequences of his actions. It was the look of a man who knew he had lost, even if he refused to admit it. "I never meant for it to happen like this," he finally muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what happened." I was confused. I tilted my head, regarding him with a mixture of sympathy and disgust. "Confused?" I repeated, letting the word sink in. "You were never confused, Reza. You were selfish. And now, you'll have to live with the consequences of that." For a long moment, we sat in silence. The waiter brought our food, but neither of us had much of an appetite. I could sense the end was near, but there was still one last thing I needed to do, one last step before I could truly walk away. "I think it's time for us to go our separate ways," I said quietly, the finality of my words hanging in the air. "You've made your choices, and I've made mine." He opened his mouth to protest, but I stood up, cutting him off before he could say anything else. "I don't need you to explain yourself, Reza. I already know everything I need to know. It's over." Without another word, I turned and walked away from the table, leaving him behind in the restaurant. I didn't look back. In the days following that confrontation, a strange sense of calm settled over me. It was as if a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying had been lifted, and I could finally breathe again. I no longer had to pretend everything was fine, no longer had to smile through the pain and the betrayal. Riza had been the anchor that had held me in place, but now I was free. Free to make my own choices, free to reclaim the life I'd once dreamed of before all the lies tangled me in their web. Riza tried to contact me again, of course. Texts, missed calls, even emails begging for a second chance. But each one was met with silence. He had no right to ask for that. Not after everything. It wasn't just Riza I had to contend with now. Vonya's role in this whole mess had become more apparent in the aftermath. The things I had suspected, the things I had overheard, her involvement went deeper than I'd initially thought. She was not only the other woman in my relationship, but she had known all along that Riza was with me. She had been playing a dangerous game, and in doing so, she had set the stage for everything that had unfolded. But I wasn't about to let her off easy. She had no idea what I was planning. One evening, about a week after that fateful dinner, I received an unexpected message. It was from Vonya. She asked to meet up, claiming that she wanted to apologize for everything, that she regretted her part in all of this. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. The audacity, the sheer nerve to think I'd be so easily swayed. But I didn't laugh. Instead, I agreed to meet her. But not at the place she suggested. No, I had my own plans. The location I chose was a quiet cafe by the river, far from the prying eyes of anyone who might know us. The place had a rustic charm, with wooden tables and soft lighting that gave it an air of secrecy. It was the perfect setting for what was to come. I arrived early, my nerves steady, but my mind sharp and calculating. This was the final piece of the puzzle, the last chance to turn the tables completely. Vonya arrived exactly on time, as I expected. She looked nervous, her hands shaking slightly as she sat across from me. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her, but that sympathy quickly vanished when I remembered everything she'd done. Clara, she began, her voice soft, almost pleading, I know you probably hate me right now, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I never meant for things to go this far, I swear. I raised an eyebrow, leaning back in my chair. Sorry. I repeated, letting the word linger between us. Is that all you have to say? Her eyes darted nervously, but she held my gaze. I just wanted to explain, she continued, that I never wanted to hurt you. Riza, he made me believe we had something special. I let her ramble on, but inside, I was laughing. The desperation in her voice, the way she was trying to justify her actions, it was pathetic. She still didn't get it. She didn't understand that this wasn't about what Riza had done or what she had felt. It was about how everything had spiraled out of control because of their lies. Vonya, I said calmly, cutting her off, you're missing the point. It's not about you and Riza. It's about you thinking you could get away with this. That you could steal from me without facing the consequences. Her expression faltered for a moment, and I could see the realization hit her. But it was too late for her to backpedal now. I've known everything for a long time, I continued, my tone cold, but I've been patient. I wanted to see how far you'd go. And now, you've gone too far. I stood up slowly, watching her face twist in confusion and fear. I don't care about your apology. I don't care about Riza. What I care about is making sure you pay for what you've done. For a split second, I thought she might cry, but then something shifted in her eyes. Fear, yes, but also a hint of recognition. She knew I wasn't just saying this to hurt her. I meant every word. Clara, please, she begged, her voice breaking. I don't want any more trouble. I'll leave. I'll disappear. But it was too late for that. There was no escaping the consequences now. I had already made my move. You should have thought about that before, I said, my voice low but firm. Before you decided to get involved in something you couldn't handle. And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving her there in the cafe, just as I had left Riza in the restaurant. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The plan had worked. Everything had gone according to plan. Riza and Vanya would never know the full extent of what I'd done, but I did. I had taken back control, and nothing would ever be the same again.